Hey jerks, new day, new problems. What the hell? Why is this here? They better not have thrown it in the back of my car. Are there presents in here? Alright, so what I didn't film last night was we actually did start it and it went right into gear, so we fixed the problem. Then I went to the meet, which was really cool. Met a lot of cool people, met a couple of people who even recognized me, which was flattering. I left the meet and somebody texted me and he said, "Yo dude, you are leaking oil." And I said, "Oh fuck, get under here." So yeah, I'm leaking oil. Pretty good bit of it. So today I'm going to clean out the garage a little bit so I have a working area and then jack up the car, see if I can trace down where it's leaking from. I have a sneaking suspicion that it's the seal, either the rear main or the oil pan seal that I didn't do correctly. And if that happens, I'm not going to pull the motor again. I'm actually going to try to do it the old-fashioned way of just taking off the transmission from underneath. I feel confident that I can do that because I've already taken it off a couple times. Let's take a look underneath, see what we can see, if anything. Well, that's wet. That's wet. Everything's wet. That's very wet. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and confirm that it's coming from the rear main. Thought maybe I would get away with this. I thought maybe I'd done it right. I had thought wrong. Okay, well, today I am going to be taking the transmission off the old-fashioned way without taking the motor out. Alright, so to do that, here's how this job works. You have to take off the PPF for the most part. Those two bolts right there, this bolt right here, these two bolts right here. You can leave one bolt in at the end just to swing this whole thing around. Then you have to remove these are the connections for the neutral switch up above here. You can't really see them, but those are connections for your reverse switch. You have to remove your slave cylinder, which is right here. You have to remove most of your exhaust. Now luckily I have downpipe speedo sensor, or the speedo whatever, that comes out. And then the rest of it, oh, and then the drive shaft has to come out. So the drive shaft, is just 4 bolts at the differential, and then this whole thing just slides out. And we'll take a look inside and see how horrible it is. Okay, quick update. I've taken off the middle part of the exhaust. I've also undone the downpipe so you can see that it's not in the way over there. And I just sort of put it up in the engine bay. Now taking off the drive shaft bolts. There are 4 of them. And there's an easy way to do this that I've found after doing this a couple of times. You use a small 10, sorry, on a 1/6 it's 12s. You use a small 12 on a ratchet, and these nuts in the back here, they're just, they're actually held in place by a little thing, so they're not gonna go anywhere. So what you do is have the car in neutral and also have the emergency brake off, and you will eventually get this one bolt out. Okay, once you get it out, like that, you want to actually turn the wheel physically, and that will turn the crankshaft, sorry, the drive shaft, to get to your next one. Now, you can put the brake back on, but especially if they're stuck. I'm using my foot on one wheel and my hand on the other wheel to keep the drive shaft from spinning. Repeat that 3 times for the rest of the bolts around here, and then you're ready to slide your drive shaft out. So now you got these 4 bolts out. You can literally slide that off of the diff. It'll slide, the drive shaft slides back into the transmission a little bit, and then you can just pull it and it falls out. So here's my reverse switch, which I was talking about earlier, and it's sketch as fuck. You can see it's already loose.
I think I'm just going to order or buy a new one because I'm sick of dealing with that. This is not the most horrible deal ever. If this doesn't work, your reverse lights just won't work, which, you know, that's a safety thing, I guess. But how often do you use your reverse? And then you just have to be super careful. But I think I am going to get a new one of these. They're only like 20 bucks, 25 bucks maybe. And they have a much better connector back here. And I just did a shit job of soldering that together. And just to, you know, make it fun, this is the neutral switch. They're completely different connectors from the reverse switch, so there's no chance of you messing those up. You actually have to reach up behind here. It's on top of the transmission to undo the connectors for the reverse switch. I don't know why Mazda decided to do that instead of putting them on the side like this one. And I think that's what a replacement switch is going to do for me. It's going to give me slightly longer leads, so hopefully I will be able to put them, maybe attach them to this wire harness, just to make things easier in the future. You physically have to wrap your arms around the transmission tunnel, and luckily there's no clip that you have to push in or anything. You just really have to pull them apart. I don't recommend pulling them by the wire, but I just did. So that's what these look like. They're just little pins that stick right into each one of those. This is going to be a great job. I can't wait to do this. There's a little nut right here that I'm pointing at, and a little nut right here that releases the whole thing and then pops out. So I believe that's a 10. So it is really simple. It's just one little screw in here. Whoops, wow, that sucked. I smashed the camera. Okay. And then this should just wiggle out. You just have to kind of wiggle it a lot, and then it comes out. See? And then it should come out of this hole. There you go. Comes out of that hole, and then it can just hang somewhere else. Alright, so when you're taking off your slave cylinder, whoops, whoa, hey now. When you take off your slave cylinder, a lot of people like take the wheel off, they try to get it from the top. I have found the easiest way to do it is just from the bottom. You use a small, your shortest 13 that you've got, and this comes off super easy. Yeah, like that, I guess. Okay, so that bottom one's broken. And then the top one is not that hard to get to. Just sort of get your wrench on it right there. And there, it's cracked and it's coming off now. So if you're struggling with it, try doing it from the bottom with a smaller open end. It's not nearly as hard as it seems. All right, so the slave cylinder is off, and there's one more thing we really should do before we start pulling off the bell housing bolts, and that is to drain the fluid, drain the transmission fluid. You never want to loosen or drain your fluid out before you check your drain plug, which is right up there. Make sure it's not seized in place, because, you know, if you can't put fluid back in, you don't want the fluid to come out. I just use a little adjustable wrench because this is a weird square bit bolt. I don't really understand why it's square, but it is. So I can take it out. So I'm not worried about that. This bolt is a 24. Ow, that hurt me a lot. Let's see if I can do this without making a giant mess. I just bought a new drain pan. Good. Alright, look how clean and syrupy brown that is. I found this in the drain pan, and that goes on this to keep it from leaking. Thought I'd mention quickly that I went ahead and pulled my slave cylinder out through the bottom there. Now most of you aren't going to be able to do this because you're not going to have this braided line. But it's probably a good idea to protect that thing down there because you're going to be banging that bell housing around, and you don't want to smash your slave cylinder or the pigtail coily hard line that goes into this. So just be aware. So I forgot to do one little thing. It always seems to be one little thing you forget to do. You can get on the top of the bell housing, on the top of the transmission, there's two bolts that you have to get out. This one over on this side, you can actually reach without too much of a trouble. I'll see if I can point to it, but my fingers are gonna get in the way. It's basically right there, right in here. So you can get a wrench in there and you can actually get that one out. Now on the other side, thought you could, I mean, you could just barely see where it needs to be, and the oil dipstick is kind of in the way, but everything's in the way. Here's a ground that was never hooked up, so that's good. I was able to use this contraption right here, this long extension with a U-joint on the end from under there, and there was plenty of room to do it. I didn't have any trouble reaching it at all. I did need to use a breaker bar because breaker bar. But anyway, here's what I forgot to do. You have to remove your turret. You can't take your transmission out because that's connected to it. Don't forget stupid stuff like me. Here's another good tip. When you are taking out your turret, it's a good idea that before you take it out, put it into first gear. Here's why. Later, we are going to line up the drive shaft, the crankshaft, into the clutch and the flywheel bearing. I guess that's the whatever that bearing is. It's not the throwout bearing, it's the other bearing. When you do that, you may have to turn the drive shaft to rotate the teeth ever so slightly so that it'll go in. You can also know that it's locked in there really good by having somebody with a 21mm wrench on the crankshaft pulley on the front turn it, and if the transmission turns, then you know you're mated up and everything is good. If it's in neutral, obviously you can just turn the crankshaft all day long and nothing's going to happen. So put it in first before you pull this. You can always do that later, but it's just easier to do it right now and you don't have to think about it later. So right about now, we're ready to pull the transmission out of there. I've got 2 more bolts that are holding the bell housing to the motor. That's just so it won't fall out without me being ready. I'm gonna put my drain plug back in there so it doesn't make a mess. And then I'm gonna get the jack under it to kind of hold the majority of the weight. And then I'm just gonna wiggle and rattle and pull. Hopefully it comes out. It should, because it was just out 2 days ago. I forgot one little bolt up in there. And I'm going to mark it with my little ding. It is the 14 up there that's connected to, actually I think there's 2 bolts. That's connected to the starter motor. This is the kind of scary part. I'm trying to break loose, moving and twisting. And as you can maybe see, I now have a gap forming here. There's a heat shield back here that sucks. This must be the one Angel was talking about removing. I think I'm gonna take some advice and make things easy on myself. Oops, and remove this heat shield right here. It's just 4 little 10s. And removing this will give me extra clearance to do wiggling. You can already see that it sort of got chunked. There is a second bolt holding the starter motor on right here. That's not gonna allow me to take it off until I remove that. All right, so now the starter bolt is out. This is moving freely. And if I just sort of wiggle it, the PPF falls on my face. That's why you don't unbolt the entire thing, I guess. There, it's out. So now I need to figure out a way to lower it. See, my problem is it's being held up by the ear up there, and if I lower it at all, it's gonna come crashing down. I'll just put the other jack under it. All right, so this could be a disaster. Might be fun to watch. It's coming down. Gonna hit the other. There we go. Okay, so it is now resting on the other jack. I should be able to move both jacks together and pull this thing out of here. A lot like that. Totally would be easier with 2 people, but not impossible with 1 person. Whoop. Let's move it out even further. Oh no, I can already see lots of oil in there. Great. So it's down, it's out, and I did it. Probably the safest thing I've ever done in this car, where I wasn't even under that thing while it was coming down, which is maybe something I would recommend anybody do, especially with more than one person. That was super easy to lower that down. 1.6 transmissions, be super extra careful. This thing right here is so sharp, it's like a razor. In fact, I might file that a little bit. Anybody handling a 1.6 transmission, watch out for that VIN plate. Almost had Jesus lose a finger over it last time. Should just be able to move that out of the way, put that on the ground. Get out of here. That wasn't that hard. Okay. Rip garage floor. So here's a stumper. I've done this before, and I remember taking the transmission out from underneath the car, but I had the same stands, and I can't get it out. So I'm just gonna have to jack up this car a little bit on this side and drag it out from the side. That's what the inside of the bell housing looks like. Pretty oily. Okay, when you're taking these bolts off, taking it off kind of the way I put it on, where you kind of go around and loosen everything a little bit, because that's exactly how you tighten it. You tighten a little bit at a time so as to not like make the pressure plate crooked. This is probably unnecessary. Well, okay, so here's the good news. The good news is there is no oil on the flywheel. Maybe on the teeth, but not on the flywheel. And I was looking at the clutch itself, and the clutch looks okay. There's no oil on the clutch. So that's the good news. I'm going to take this flywheel off and look at the horrors beneath. So this is what was behind the flywheel. This is all fresh oil. It appears that the rear main seal kind of fell apart. This rubber part just disintegrated. So I believe I know what happened here. When we put it in, we used Jose's interesting method of putting the flywheel on to push it into place. Unfortunately, that wasn't good enough. And this just fell apart. I guess this has to get pushed all the way in, like everyone else says, flush with the back piece here. Because if not, it might make contact with something and it just sort of eats itself. And I'm going to say that this gasket did okay. There's way too much RTV on that, but obviously this thing spins around. Oh no, what spins around? Something spins around. I'm not really sure what spins around. Yeah, how does this work? I don't know, does this spin around? Fuck it, I don't know. How do motors work? Wow, I suck at this. I wonder if it's okay to have oil in the starter. Didn't seem to be a problem. There is oil literally everywhere. Yay me.